Subscribe to The Honest Critique for current affairs, movie, book, and product reviews. Also, make sure you press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the video series are solely those of the individuals and do not necessarily represent those of The Honest Critique and its employees. The following video contains strong language which may be offensive to some viewers. Viewer discretion advised.
So, hello and welcome to a very special interview that we are recording with Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasser. He was a former head of the research division at the Israel Defense Forces Intelligence Corps, as well as the Director General of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. During his military service, he served among the position as the Central Command's intelligence officer and as the Intelligence Attaché to the United States. He also participated in the Yom Kippur War and the First Lebanon War. So thank you so much, sir, for taking your time and speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
So, sir, since you participated in the Yom Kippur War and it's the 50th anniversary when the gruesome attack took place, can you tell us what was the nature and extent of this surprise attack launched by the Hamas and other terrorists in Gaza on Israel on the morning of October 7, and if you could draw parallels between the Yom Kippur War, and is there anything similar between the two?
Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of similarities between the two. First of all, both cases were happening because of misunderstanding of the strategic situation and strategic goals of the enemy. And I'm not going to dive deep into what happened in 73 now, but in 73 the problem was that we didn't understand that Sadat is determined to launch the war, comes what may, and even if he doesn't have the necessary equipment, he is going to launch the war. And that's why we were complacent, and we believed that there's not going to be a war. And Sadat feels too weak for launching a war, and so on and so forth. Here again, we had a mistake, a terrible mistake of a different nature. We didn't understand how committed to killing Israelis Hamas is, how terroristic, how to what extent it's terroristic and jihadic identities coming from an extreme interpretation of Islam and deep hatred that was embedded in their souls for so many years. How deep this is in their identity and how they are ready to carry out these savage terror attacks, regardless of the strategic situation or whatever this may mean for Hamas in the future. They are totally committed to that goal, and we believe that they are deterred, that they are becoming more moderate, that they are concerned first and foremost with the well-being of the people of Gaza. That because we just allowed them, a couple of days before that, we gave them the permission to bring in more workers from Gaza into Israel, and that solved some riots along the fence, the separating between Israel and Gaza. So we thought that everything is all right. Hamas has changed its colors. It is deterred. It's going to be a nice neighbor. This is impossible because Hamas is an Islamic radical fanatic organization determined and totally committed to destroying Israel, to killing Israelis. And we saw how they did it with such a joy, it's unbelievable. They were so happy to kill and murder and do it without any mercy. Complete families were massacred. This is the nature of Hamas that we become ignorant to in a long time. It's terrible. This is a major mistake, just like what we did in 73. The second mistake, also similar to what happened in 73, was that we didn't understand what is the operational method that the enemy is going to take. We believe that in 73, we believe that we should expect a deep attack into the midst of Sinai Peninsula, and we were prepared for that, and that's what we anticipated. Here, we thought that we managed to block all the ways Hamas can operate because we closed the tunnels coming from Gaza into Israel, and we have the Iron Dome and other methods with which we can deal with the rockets they are firing. not all of them, but 90% of them. And we thought that this is it. They can't operate. Instead of thinking, what are they going to do, bearing in mind that this is the situation? They are so committed to killing Israelis that are going to come up with some new ideas that we didn't think of. We should have thought about their ideas, and we didn't do that. Instead of that, we became complacent again. And what we saw is that Hamas in the last 2 years since the last operation in Guardian of the Walls, they sat down together with the Iranians, together with Hezbollah, and broke their heads. What should we do next? Because all the other options were taken care of. And they came up with this operational method, which turned out to be extremely murderous from their point of view, successful. And breaking the fence in several places simultaneously, spreading their squads of death all over the place, and taking us in by surprise. And this was the method they have used. They killed more than 900 people by doing that. It's unbelievable, terrible result from our side. And that was a surprise, operational surprise. The Egyptians did the same. The Egyptians said, okay, we can't carry out an attack towards the midst of Sinai or towards the eastern side of Sinai. So we'll take whatever we can with, even if it's only a couple of kilometers, we are going to focus on that. And that we didn't understand that. And the third problem was that a tactical surprise. I mean, we didn't understand in 73 that the accumulation of forces along the Suez Canal meant war and not an exercise. And here we didn't even notice that the Hamas terrorists are coming close to the border and crossing them. And this would have to be checked how this all happened. We are now focused on fighting back, but we don't have time for investigations now. But this is going to be discussed in the future to see how this has happened. That we didn't notice that so many vehicles and the air squads that they used were crossing the copters that they used to deliver the people inside Israel. How that happened without us noticing it at all and being totally taken by surprise. And of course, we also had, just like in 73, not only intelligence problems, but also some deep operational problems, because nobody was there to protect the civilians living along the border that were massacred by the terrorists in the beginning. In the first something like 6 hours, there was almost nobody there, and the terrorists just massacred people without any interruption. This was terrible. There were many shows of supreme heroism by people who were fighting back with bare hands, but in spite of that, more than 900 people were killed.
And that is something that I wanted to ask you, sir, that based on your experience in the military and intelligence, can you estimate the duration of the planning of such an attack, especially considering the length of the operation and the knowledge that they have of where the rave party was happening, and the places that they used for civilian kidnapping? How it has gone through a very sophisticated level of planning, right? If I'm not wrong.
Well, truthfully, I must say that the secret of this planning, as it seems to me, is simplicity. So simple. It's less sophisticated and more simple. It's learning the area beyond the target area. They knew exactly, and this is not difficult because they live there and we live there. So they knew where the communities are located. They knew where are the major army bases. They knew how this operates. This has been exposed by Israel many times. They knew where are the police stations that they attacked first targets, so that nobody will be able to help the civilians, and they knew well the terrain. Secondly, they used very simple tools. They used explosive charges to destroy the fence in several places and cross into Israel in these places. They used the idea of swarms, which is an Iranian idea. They took it, I guess, from Iran, in order to operate simultaneously in many places, so that it would be difficult for Israel in the beginning to develop some sort of a situation picture and send forces to take care of the problem. If there was only one case, we would have been able to deal with it much easier. And they use just simple pickups in order to cross the fence, carrying terrorists well armed with light arms and some RPGs, and that's it. It was very simple. And yes, some of them came with through the air, but this was not the major operation. And yes, this is the gliders, but all in all, it was a very simple operation, well planned, well executed from their point of view, and they managed to catch us by surprise. And they unfortunately had this music festival that provided them with plenty of targets. We had more than something like 270 people killed in the music festival. There was nobody guarding, no protection. This was a terrible case. And they also went to the communities, went from house to house, killed innocent families, there's no sophistication in that. It's a simple thing to do if you want to kill civilians. That's a terrible thing. That's the savage nature of these people. That's planning how to kill civilians. You hear all these stories. How they took people out of their shelters and then just killed them from blank point. It's terrible.
And sir, I know it's not the right time to talk about something like an intelligence failure, but looking at how the delayed response has been, or how clueless the government was actually in preventing an attack, was there an imminent intelligence failure when to prevent such an attack of this scale? There has been, they were invading by the land, by the water, and by the air as well. So it has gone through some planning. Could have had been prevented in the longer run, actually, if there was some intelligence.
Definitely. This is a terrible intelligence failure. I'm not saying it's, as I explained before, it's even worse than the one we had in 73. It's very similar to the one we had in 73, but it's worse than that, because in 73 it was about military preparing to carry out an attack against another military and against our military. It was military to military, and it was 200 something kilometers away from civilian centers. Here, the repercussion of such a surprise with a small terror organization is 10 times bigger. It's a terrible intelligence failure. The failure is multifaceted, because first of all, it seems that we didn't have the information, the plain information that you need in order to thwart such an attack. To know that we have something like 1,000 terrorists killed in our territory. I mean, such a huge operation was carried out without us knowing anything about it. That's mind-boggling. How could that have happened? But and we have good intelligence about Gaza. It's not that we don't have intelligence about Gaza, but this was kept as a secret. I think the most impressive element in this operation from the side of Hamas is the way they managed to keep it as a secret. That is an intelligence failure, because this intelligence should know the secrets. To know what's on the open sources, it's relatively easy, but to know the secrets, this is a challenge, and we didn't know that. And this is a terrible. And you know what? it's even worse than that, because they did give us hints and open sources. There were some people from Hamas who said, this is what's going to happen. And we didn't take it seriously because we didn't have, concrete information that from secretive sources that would support this understanding. And the fact is that we didn't take it, we didn't know about it coming and going to happen. Definitely not in this time. In 73, we had some sources who told us, listen, there's going to be a war. And there was a very famous source, Ashraf Marwan, who told us about the war a day in advance. And we weren't that surprised. We were surprised, but we were not astonished. This time we were both surprised and astonished by this operation. It's a terrible intelligence failure. All the intelligence community is going to have to go through a thorough investigation for themselves in order to improve the way they handle the situation in the future.
So, what is more surprising in this occasion? Is it the fact that it comes from Hamas at this point of time when there has not been any kind of engagement with Hamas for the last 2 years? Probably if it would have come from the Hezbollah or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, would have been less shocking than it came from Hamas at this point of time, especially when Israel opened the borders actually for more aid and allowing workers to come to Israel and work.
This is a major part of the surprise, because we were very focused on Hezbollah and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and others, and we thought that Hamas is deterred. And although we realized we were speaking about the growing force of and the growing influence of Iran, and how Iran is using Hezbollah and Hamas as parts of the ring in which they want to build around Israel to threaten it and to promote a multi-front attack against Israel from the north and from the south simultaneously. We were aware of the option, but we were not aware of the materialization of this option within such a short period of time. At these circumstances, you said, after we gave them permission to bring in more and more workers into Israel, situation in Gaza was relatively good. There was no reason, but they didn't have any way of justifying their operation. If you look at the declaration that they are trying to connect it to the situation in Al-Aqsa, in the mosque in Jerusalem, but there was nothing happening in Al-Aqsa. Everything was calm in Al-Aqsa as well. There was no justification. There was no reason, no trigger that we could have explained to ourselves, and they could have used in order to explain to themselves why they're doing it right now. There are many strategic explanations. The growing force of Iran, they feel more omnipotent and more capable, strengthened and emboldened, because the West is showing very weak response to their progress on the nuclear field and their nuclear program. The West is not doing anything about their regional force coming up, and the way they handled the situation in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen. All these things are accepted by the West. Nobody does anything about it. Saudi Arabia is resuming diplomatic relations with Iran. Iran is gaining more and more strength, and then the West doesn't do anything also about the growing relationship between Iran and Russia. And the way that the Iranians supply the UAVs to Russia to attack Ukraine. So the feeling is that Iran is on the march to becoming more and more powerful. And this has impacted the Iranian proxies like Hamas and others. So we see that happening. On the other hand, I also see Israel not responding very fiercely and showing weaknesses. Israel is deeply divided, was deeply divided before this operation started at home, and it was a show of weakness. Israel was not responding fiercely to Hezbollah's provocations, and actually the former government agreed to give Hezbollah everything they wanted in the Gaza agreement in late 2022, and thereafter the new government was also not showing very much readiness to confront Hezbollah with the provocations of Hezbollah along the border with Lebanon. So they thought Israel is weak, the West is weak, everybody's weak, nobody's going to do anything to us. That's a good opportunity to do something. And they were also provoked themselves by the fear that Israel is going to have normal relations with Saudi Arabia. Everything was going in this direction. So they thought maybe if we do something terrible, this is going to stop the normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And they wanted also to further weaken the Palestinian Authority led by Abu Mazen, who was losing popularity by the day. And this was for them a way to show that while Abu Mazen is so weak and cannot do anything, they kill Israelis by the hundreds. These are all considerations that they had, but truly there was no real excuse, no real trigger for launching this attack. And of course, there's never a trigger that justifies it, but not even a trigger that can justify it for them. For us, nothing will justify it, but not even for them. This was just sheer interest in killing Israelis. That was what leading them, and we were surprised because, as I said in the beginning, we didn't think that there are such terrible creatures, terrible people that would be interested simply in killing, massacring with cold blood hundreds of people. How, for us, this is so impossible to happen that when you cannot imagine that somebody would do that. This is an imagination failure, as was the case in 73, and it was the case in 9/11. Imagination failure. We couldn't imagine that this is what these people are going to do. And it's a terrible intelligence failure. I can tell you that I myself, unlike the other intelligence people, I wrote a paper back in June explaining that this is what's going to happen. I didn't figure out exactly what is the operational way they are going to operate. So Hamas is going to operate, and we should be ready for that, and we should be able to put an end to Hamas. And what the government is doing now is, if they read my paper and performing it by the letter, that we should be ready to put an end to the threat from Hamas, because the threat of Hamas is the most important threat that we are going to face. I said, yes, Hezbollah is much bigger and much stronger. Iran may become, it's already a threshold nuclear state. All these threats are huge and immense, and we have to take care of them. But the immediate threat, the one that is going to materialize, is Hamas. And because of that, we should focus on Hamas and get ready to prepare ourselves to fight Hamas properly. At the time, I was criticized heavily, and I published this article in the Middle East Forum in the United States. And the Middle East Forum, and they have a publication called Middle East Quarterly. And the first one, they published my paper, and the next Middle East Quarterly was dedicated to people who criticized my paper. Or many people wrote articles criticizing my paper. And well, now they'll have to eat their article. But if you understand what Hamas is, you understand that this is what they are going to do. It's unfortunately, and you got to learn. Many people, you got to study their writings and their way of thinking, which is very similar, by the way, to that of Daesh, of the Islamic State. What I'm concerned now is that all these friends of Hamas that are coming, because Hamas, as I wrote in this article, is a unique creature. It belongs both to the Iranian-led Shiite extreme camp and to the Sunni camp as well, because it's a Sunni organization. So they are the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. According to the thinking of the Muslim Brotherhood, whereas in most places, Muslims should be wise and not necessarily carry out terror attacks against the Jews in Israel. This is allowed. And so in respect to Israel, their attitude is very similar to that of Daesh everywhere else, to that of ISIS everywhere else. They're ready to kill everybody without any caveats and limitations. And I'm afraid that both camps, the Iranian camp, and we see it already, and the Sunni camp of radicals, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, all kinds of organizations that operate in areas closer to India, Lashkar Taiba and others, will be emboldened by what happened here. Say, oh, you can massacre so many Israelis if you carry out such attack. Maybe we should do something as well. So I would say Indians and everybody else around the world should be on alert now. I, for example, I have a case where I saw this happening. This was when Hamas kidnapped Gilad Shalit, if you remember, back in 2006. I immediately went to the people in Northern Command and I told them I was already not left my position a couple of weeks before this happened. And I went to the people of Northern Command. I said to them, look, if Hamas managed to kidnap an Israeli soldier, Hezbollah is going to try to do the same immediately. You should be on a very high alert. They, of course, didn't listen to me. And we had the kidnapping that led to the 2006 war, Second Lebanon War. But I'm afraid that now there are going to be all kinds of elements of radical Islam, because for them this is the right thing to do. They celebrate, they give away chocolates and then the candies. They are so happy that you have to understand how twisted their minds are. This is what they're doing right now.
And so you rightly mentioned this, that I wanted to ask you on this as well, that the similarities that Hamas shared with Daesh actually, and it's very interesting, even in the manifesto that they've clearly mentioned what their ideologies and goals are. But we have seen a lot of people in the Israel policy space has advocated for a more nuanced approach, or a rather not a carrot and stick policy, but just carrot policy for Hamas, that you can rein in Hamas, you can stop Hamas from attacking Israelis if you give them sufficient resources. And you can actually let them stay in their own region on Gaza. But looking at this kind of attack of this scale, is that policy right out of the head right now, that we cannot stop Hamas from changing the nature of who they are as ruthless murderers actually?
Yeah, I think now everybody understands that this entire policy was totally baseless and had nothing to do with the real nature of Hamas. But until recently, yes, we had people that were advocating exactly what you were saying. Let's speak with Hamas. Let's help Hamas, and that's the way we are going to gain more and more time without confrontation, violent confrontations. The entire policy until now was to give Hamas all kinds of benefits, so that we shall have longer period of quiet. What I advocated in this paper that I mentioned before was that this is a wrong attitude. I said, why do we let Hamas arm itself to its teeth in between the rounds, and we don't carry out attacks against Hamas infrastructure? You know, we have just attacked more than 1,200 Hamas targets in the last 3 days. Okay, why did we let Hamas have 1,200 targets in the first place? I said we shouldn't let them have it, because eventually these targets, these factories of where they produce the weapons, these command and control posts, all of these elements are going to work against us when Hamas believes that is ready. And yes, I think that from now on, we are not going to go back to this totally problematic and detached from reality policy, and adopt a new policy of ongoing fight, ongoing battle against Hamas to weaken it, to keep it weak, and to make it impossible for Hamas to launch another attack in the future.
And so, for our audience, if you could mention a little bit about the action that Israel has taken. I mean, what has the Israeli the IDF done in response to the attack, both in military operation and civil defense measures, actually?
Well, first of all, what we had to do was to regain full control of the areas that were attacked by those terrorists. And as I said, we had something like more than 1,000 terrorists infiltrating into Israel. It took. I'm not sure that we have finished that yet. By and large, we are in control, but there are still some terrorists here and there that pop up and carry out attacks. We just lost some people this morning, I think, in one of these attacks. It's not clear yet. And this is after we killed more than 1,000, and we captured quite a few, several dozens we captured, and still not over yet. But we are focusing on clearing this area. We're going from house to house and searching for the terrorists that are still there, and trying to apprehend them or kill them if they fight. That's our first main goal, and to really understand how terrible the massacre was. We are still collecting corpses from here and there, and we just in one community in the community of Be'eri, we ended up with 108 bodies that we had to take away from there, civilian bodies, and from the area of where the big music festival was held, we had 270 bodies. It's the numbers and are devastating, really, and we are reported on the number of casualties in each and every community. It's devastating. So this is the first thing we have to do. Secondly, we are at the same time we are already on the offensive. So far, our offensive is mainly done by the Air Force, and as I said, we have already attacked more than 1,200 targets. We are causing a lot of damage. Gaza is not like it was before this Saturday, and it is suffering a lot of attacks. We are still focusing on measures that are pinpointing towards Hamas facilities, and I guess we are going to stick to this policy. But Hamas has this habit of using civilians as human shields. So they've placed their offices in floor 7 of a 9 stories building, believing that we should not carry out an attack. If we can, we target floor 7 without hitting floor 8 or 6. Sometimes it's not always possible, and sometimes we cause damage to the other floors of this building as well, and some of them are just falling apart. In most cases, we give early warning to the people in this high-rising buildings to leave the place, but we not always can do that, because if the Hamas operatives are inside and from there they are conducting operations, we have to kill them and to hit them, and it's not always possible to give early warning to the entire building. Whenever we can, we do. And at the same time, our military is doing another effort that is very important. This is to take care of the borderline. So not only that we clean the area that was penetrated, but we should be able to make sure that no new terrorists are coming from Gaza to the areas that where there are a lot of people in these places right now, and we don't want to put them in jeopardy. So we have to protect the border to prevent any entry by more terrorists into Israel. third thing we're doing in this respect is we have taken all kinds of measures against the Hamas capabilities by closing the electricity. We supply the electricity that is being used by the Hamas in order to produce the weapons that they launch against us, the rockets. So we decided to put an end to this crazy situation. We don't give them neither electricity nor gasoline. But they still get some gasoline from Egypt. Most of the gasoline coming from Egypt. But not from us from now on. We supply them with the cement. We supply them with everything that they use in order to build the capabilities to attack us. It's a crazy situation. So we have put an end to it, but it's not going to have an immediate impact because they have a lot of reserves. So I don't think it's going to have any impact immediately. But we have to start somewhere. And fourthly, what is the most important thing in this respect? By the way, in the attacks, it's not only from the air, also from the sea. Our Navy is also doing a great job and attacking from the sea and thwarting a lot of attempts to carry out attacks from the sea. Hamas has a naval unit that they were trying to use in order to carry out attacks from the sea. They were not successful at all in this. The Navy did a very, very good job. Unlike the Army, the Navy was performing great. So on top of that, now what we're doing is we are mobilizing our forces. We have mobilized 4 divisions in order to have the capability to enter Gaza and to take care of Hamas in Gaza. We have not yet decided, to the best of my understanding, when and if and when we are going to do it, but we definitely decided to create the opportunity and the possibility to do that. And we are preparing the forces. We mobilize them. We equip them. We do. Usually when you do something like that, you do it in advance. You have the time to prepare everything and properly, and so on and so forth, to have the forces train themselves and all that. This time, this was forced upon us by surprise by Hamas, so we have to do that in a harsh way, in a hasty manner. But we shall do that, and in a couple of coming days, we shall have the forces ready. And if we decide to enter the Gaza Strip, which in my mind, the chances are very high, unlike former rounds of violence, this time the prospects of Israel entering the Gaza Strip are pretty high. And yes, I know Hamas is waiting for that, is preparing for that as well. It's not only us. They too are preparing. We shall have to be forceful and determined and use our capabilities in order to prevent them from stopping us, and we shall probably do that. At the same time, we have to dedicate forces and attention to what's happening on other fronts. We have the front in the north that is becoming more and more active. We had several attacks from the north yesterday. We retaliated fiercely immediately, but we lost warrior and military man. So Lieutenant Colonel was killed, and we had about 10 casualties on the other side. And the border with Lebanon, which is actually the border with Hezbollah, is getting more and more active as we speak. And we have to also look at what's happening in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority and the attacks coming from there. We had a very hectic day in the West Bank yesterday. A lot of activity. So a lot of terror activity. So it's we have our hands full, but our main effort right now is to take care of Hamas.
And Prime Minister Netanyahu has called this as an act of war, and it will be a kind of a prolonged war, something that Israel hasn't seen in the last 50 years after the 1973 war. Actually, we have seen shorter wars, much more focused on achieving a single or a kind of 2 to 3 more targets. That's all. But here we have seen that a lot of statements from the defense minister and the prime minister that this will be a war that the Gazans will remember or the Hamas will remember for a really long time. Especially actually with how the situation escalating and probably Hezbollah joining the war. Is Israel ready for a multifaceted war? And where do you see this escalating actually? What's the final result that probably you're looking at?
Well, what the defense minister said is exactly what we are trying to accomplish. We want to inflict such a heavy damage on Hamas that everybody, and first of all Hamas, but not only Hamas, everybody will understand that this was a mistake by Hamas to launch this horrific terror operation against us. This was a big mistake, and they are going to pay heavily. That's the, I don't know, 50 years. Who knows? But for a very long period of time, and we are, as I said, the main difference between what happened before and what was going to happen from now on is that we are not going to wait for Hamas to develop the weapons before we operate. We have to operate as soon as we understand that Hamas is trying to develop a weapon. We should operate immediately. That's the main difference. But before that, we have to make sure that Hamas doesn't have all this that it had before this war has started. And our main effort right now is to deprive Hamas from all these weapons and from the people that are operating these weapons. And that's what we are doing right now. The Hamas also has, like, I don't know, it's 2,000 people killed. It's we are suffering because we had 900 innocent people killed, but they have 2,000 terrorists killed. It's not a minor issue for an organization like Hamas, and they are going to lose more. They're going to lose many more in the coming few days. And yes, it's going to be, I don't know how long it's going to be, but we are not going to stop before we achieve our goals. That depends on how much time it takes to achieve our goals. One of the goals, by the way, is going to be to release the prisoners, to release the hostages. This is one other goal, and I think that for that purpose we might take harsh measures against Hamas, indicating that if they don't bring them back, they are going to suffer very heavily.
And so, in the longer run, do you see there will be a demilitarization of Gaza, and Israel going back to the 2005 position of how they had control over Gaza before de-escalation? Do you see ground offensives aimed at actually gaining control over Gaza?
Well, we started this war without a strategy of what's going to happen in the day after in Gaza. We don't have a clear strategy of what's going to happen in the day after in Gaza. It's we shall have to work it out. I don't know that we have any clear idea. We might end up controlling Gaza. Nobody here wants it. We don't want to deal with the daily problems of the Gazans, of the sewage and the water supply and the economic problems. We are ready to help them. We are not. We have nothing against the population of Gaza. It's we would like to see them as good neighbors. It's we are accepting them in Israel as merchants. It's workers. There's no problem. We all remember the days before this whole terrorism started, where we were traveling to Gaza to have a good knafe, which is I don't know if you know what knafe is, but it's an extremely tasty dish. And this was the case not that many years ago. If this is going to be the case in the future, wonderful. We don't want to run the daily lives, but if nobody else can do that without being totally committed to killing Israelis, then we shall have to do that. The problem in Gaza is that we first of all have to change the education system. This entire education system of the Gazans that is being provided by both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority is an education system that inculcates in the minds of the people in Gaza that the purpose in life is to kill Jews. That's the most important thing that everyone there, every child, you ask a child, what do you want to be? He says, I want to be a shaheed. I want to be a terrorist that kills Jews and get killed and go to heaven. That's my dream. If you look at the summer camps of the children in Gaza, it's all about how to kill Jews. It's it's exactly like what happened in the Islamic State at the time when it was governing parts of Iraq and Syria. It's that's what we are facing here. So before we can let go, we have to make sure that the education system is changed, that they teach the children about peace and understanding and about how to be more productive, not committed to killing Jews. That is not going to happen overnight, and that's why I'm not sure that we should be able to go away from there and just leave them to to be governed by Hamas, because Hamas is going to keep telling these people that their purpose in life is to kill Jews, and we have to deal with that. We can deal with the armament of Hamas, but the minds are much more sorry, they are much more demanding. Sorry. And I think that this is a huge challenge. What do you do with this kind of population that's totally brainwashed to celebrate the murder of Jews? And that's what they do. It's not only the Hamas. They managed to make almost the majority of the people living in Gaza are so happy that Jews were massacred. It's if we just leave them to their fate, they're going to somehow think of another way to kill Jews. We have to make sure that something changes in this. I saw yesterday that the European Union, some people in the European Union decided to stop giving money to the Palestinian education, which is, I think, the most important thing to do. You don't fund education that prepare people to hate and to kill other people. That doesn't make no sense. And but of course, unfortunately, I heard later on that some Europeans are saying, no, we are not going to do that. So that's, but there's a lot of support for Israel right now and around the world, and was a joint communique by leaders around the world that understand what kind of threat and the challenge Israel is facing. I'm not sure that this is going to last forever, but especially once we start coming in Gaza, and there are going to be probably some casualties, civilian casualties as well. And the situation is not going to be as clear as it is now. It's going to be a little bit more messy, and we'll see what happens. But for the time being, we have to sit down and think about what are we going to do with Gaza in the day after.
So my last question is regarding, you've mentioned as well the civilians and some IDF soldiers that have been captured by Hamas. Do you see any point of negotiation with Hamas at this point of time? As countries like Qatar have suggested, they will like to actually help in negotiation. Possibly a prisoner exchange. Will Israel want to go for a prisoner exchange at this point of time, knowing that the same prisoners that they might exchange will come and attack again? Or is there a different method that Israel is trying this time?
Well, I think the hostages is a very delicate issue. On the one hand, they took all kinds of women and young babies, and it's a crazy situation. I think they should bring them back without any price. That's it's not only a war crime. It's a crime against humanity. It's unbelievable what was going through their minds that when they were doing that. You know, they showed this old lady that is captured by them, and they force her to show the sign of victory, and it's crazy stuff. they should bring them back without any condition. The rest of the hostages, I think we should put a lot of pressure on Hamas to make them understand that if they insist on keeping these hostages in their hands, they're going to pay a price that's going to endanger their existence, and force them to release their hostages by force. That's what we need to do. If we manage to do some operation, wonderful, but I cannot guarantee anything on that. But we should put a lot of pressure on Hamas to release the hostages, all the hostages. You know, they have 4 hostages in advance. Before this war started, they had 2 corpses and 2 Israeli civilians in their hands. I don't think that we should release anybody. We should not release anybody. We should put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages. That's what we should do, and give nobody in exchange for that, because this is just giving them a reward for the terror attack they carried out. We shouldn't give them any rewards, and they are just on the opposite. We should charge them with heavy prices. And another thing about hostages, I don't think that the hostages should play a role. The hostage issue should not play a role in our military activity right now. We should go on with the military activities. It's a terrible situation, it is, but we already have so many casualties. We should change the situation. That's the most important thing. Change the situation. Make sure that Hamas is not able to launch any attack in the future. That is the most important thing. The hostages issue will be dealt with either through putting pressure or later on after the war is over.
Well, sir, those are the questions that I had, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for answering them.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and